Welcome to Kicking Your Teen's Troubles to the Curb with host Christina Nation, the ultimate guide for parents navigating the challenging yet rewarding journey of raising teenagers. Join your host Christina as she dives deep into the world of adolescence, tackling everything from academic pressures and social dynamics to mental health and independence. So please, welcome the host of Kicking Your Teen's Troubles to the Curb, Christina Nation.
Hello and welcome to Kick Your Teens Challenges to the Curb. I am your host, Christina Nation, and we are streaming on Bold Brave TV. I'm super excited today to introduce you to my guest, Clarissa Constantine. Clarissa's journey to champion connection and resilience is deeply personal. Growing up as an only child with a tough relationship with her mom, she always wished for closer family bonds. That experience sparked her passion for helping others build the kinds of connections she longed for. While studying at the University of Hartford, Clarissa started what turned into a decades long career as a test prep coach. She helped thousands of students navigate the twists and turns of college and grad school admissions. With her natural intuition, she often found herself going beyond academics, supporting students through life's ups and downs. Her own experience with her mom drove her to help families avoid the regrets and missed moments she'd known too well. Clarissa is the founder of Parent Tween Connection, a platform dedicated to fostering meaningful relationships within families and professional communities. Through this initiative, she leads two impactful membership programs: the Parent Tween Village, a supportive community for parents seeking stronger connections with their teens and tweens, and the Trusted Expert Network, a collaborative space for professionals who work with teens, tweens, parents, and families. She also pours her heart into her signature coaching program, the Connection Blueprint, where parents and entrepreneurs create a personalized plan to strengthen their relationships with family, colleagues, and clients. For Clarissa, connection isn't just important, it's everything. And she's on a mission to help people build lasting relationships that bring love, understanding, and joy. So, welcome, Clarissa. So, welcome to the show, Clarissa. So happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Christina. It's a pleasure to be here and chat with you about a topic that I know is near and dear to both of our hearts, and supporting families and supporting their kiddos a little more effectively, hopefully.
Yes, yes, dear to both of our hearts for sure. Because, the first chapter of my book is all about connection, right? Because that's where
hmm
it starts. So, can you share a little bit more about how you started this work and kind of some of the foundations of connection?
Absolutely. So there's two parts there. So as you mentioned, my mom and I had our challenges. The way that I put it at her services when she passed about 5.5 years ago is I never doubted that she loved me and wanted what was best for me. But what she thought was best for me and what I thought was best for me typically didn't align, especially as I navigated life as a teenager and beyond. And I think we both fell into a pattern where we were each more focused on proving that we were right about what was best for me. And I think we lost the ability to be kind and loving along the way. So like, I just had somebody ask me last night, how come you started something like this and you don't even have children of your own? And I said, because I remember all too acutely, because of my work as a test prep coach over the last 27 years, I remember what it's like to be a teenager more than I think many folks my age. And
Mm,
it just when friends came to us saying that they were having challenges with their kiddo who is, I know you've heard me say it, making all the decisions you don't want your teenage kiddo making, and the mom says to me, "I just wish I had other parents to talk to." It was a lightning bolt. And I started thinking
mm,
back to my experience as a teenager and thinking, what would it have been like maybe if back in the early 90s, dating myself here, but what would it have or what could it have been like if my mother had a community of other moms or moms and dads who were navigating life with teenagers? Could it have helped us avoid some of the pitfalls that we navigated? Because the thing is, we disconnected when I was a teenager and we never reconnected. And
mm.
we never got close again. I mean, yeah, she was my mom. I talked to her and whatnot, but I never really felt a closeness like a lot of people feel with their moms. And I will tell you that when you have that kind of a relationship, excuse me, when the time comes that they pass on in the natural order of things, that the parent goes before the kiddo is left. And I mean, I was in my 40s when my mom passed. You not only do you grieve the loss of the parent, but you grieve the loss of the hope that anything will ever be different. So that's a big piece
Mhm.
of what drives me to help other families avoid some of the pitfalls. Even if we can avoid one pitfall, there's a ripple effect. And so
Right,
the more that we can help families navigate those scenarios more effectively, the better it's gonna be for all of us.
right,
So
right.
that's the
And when
backstory
it
on how it
comes
came to be.
to, yeah, yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And I think so when it comes to that connection, it's all relationships, right? So not
Mm.
only our relationships with our teens, but with our partners, with our colleagues, with our siblings, all right? Yeah,
Well, and
yeah.
even,
So what
for
are
folks like you and
yeah,
me who are coaches, right? Or
mhm,
entrepreneurs who, we're responsible for,
right,
we say head cook and bottle washer, right? Because when you're a solopreneur, we're responsible for doing all of it. And that includes our marketing, that includes our finding prospective clients, that includes selling to our prospective clients in some fashion. I believe that those foundations of connection are the same in any relationship, as you're indicating.
mhm,
If you're a manager, you're in corporate America, you're in middle management, the managers who have the best retention of their employees are the ones who connect with them and see them as humans and not just automatons and employees.
yeah, yeah. And I would even say that those who have the skills of nurturing connection and relate in their relationships are the ones that are going to truly be the most successful and happy in life. So it's very
Absolutely.
important. And yeah, and then how do we teach our teens to have that in other relationships is by modeling it for them with the relationship that we have with them, right? Yeah.
And in the relationships that we have with their other parent, if their other parent is still in the picture, whether we're coupled up with that person or separated or divorced, or the way that we engage with our peers as well. So many parents are like, ah, my kids tune me out. They don't pay attention to me. They act like that, but they are watching. No, they don't mimic you to learn how to say a word like a 2-year-old would. Like, they're not doing exactly what you want, exactly the way you want them to do it, but they're paying attention, and they're paying a lot of attention to our behaviors, and not just the parents. I mean, primarily the parents, because parents are their first role models, but they pay attention to all
Right.
the other adults in their lives as well. Those of us who are the biological or honorary aunts and uncles or grandparents, they watch us too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what some of those foundational pieces of connection are.
Absolutely. And I don't have my visual to hold up for folks today, but so we're going to have to rely on the auditory side of our learning. But the foundations of connection are basically 10 concepts, the first letter of each of which spells out the word connection. So it's an acronym for us. And I want to be clear as we talk about these that these are not linear. These are like the ball of yarn that the cat got to. But they're interwoven, they're intermingled. You're going to think you're really good at one, and then you're going to be diving into another and realize that you need to come back to that first one. But so in the order of the letters of connection, we have create a safe place, observe, non-judgment, nod and smile, as in zip it, explore, which you could also take that E to mean educate, like to educate yourself on topics you're not familiar with. So that's CONNE. C is challenge your truths or curiosity. T is take your time. I is innovate. And then we have own your own story and nurture, which you've actually already mentioned today, Christina. And
Yeah, I
so
love that.
these actually came out of a conversation that I had with myself, if you will, where I said, Self, why is it that teenagers will more frequently feel comfortable talking to me or somebody like me, basically anybody other than mom or dad, about some
Mhm.
really heavy stuff in the beginning? Ultimately, some of the stuff they need to talk to mom and dad about, but sometimes they need to talk to somebody else first. And a lot of parents get frustrated by this, but I'm their mom. They should want to come talk to me. I think one of the things that we need to remember is that kids fundamentally are afraid of disappointing their parents. They're afraid of letting their
Mhm.
parents down. And let's also be honest about the fact that they're afraid of the discipline that's going to come down if and when, really, we should say when, behavior is such that warrants discipline. So
Mhm.
talking to me, I'm able to be a safe place because there's not like no harm, no foul. What am I going to do? Ground them as an SAT coach? Probably not. I can just observe. I'm not typically going to be very judgmental of them unless it's a case where they did something that really was unwise, where I'll reflect to them, hey, that was probably not your smartest decision, was it? I'm able to stay quiet. I'm able to explore things with them. And so much of this is because I don't have that emotional history with them. I don't
Mhm.
have I'm going to call it emotional baggage for lack of any other way of putting it. But the fact is, when you're in relationship with somebody, even if it's an adult child relationship like this, there's still emotional history. So there's
Mhm.
patterns of behavior. We see this in partnerships all the time, right? Every time I say this, my husband says that because we fall into these patterns of behavior. And until one of us chooses to change that pattern, it's going to keep repeating. So I'm able to come in, or you as a coach with teenagers or with parents, you're able to come in and say, hey, wait a second. We can have this conversation without that pattern of behavior, but we can also offer the parent or the student, the teenager, thoughts about how they can alter their patterns as well. And that's how we
Mhm.
start to impact change.
Right, right. So important. Yeah. So let's dig a little deeper into some of those to your acronym there. So the first one, tell us a little bit more about that.
So, really creating a safe place. I'll give you an example. My mother had some very clear views on her perspectives about sex before marriage. I'll leave it at that. And
Mhm.
when I told my dad, many, many years later, actually within the last few years since my mom passed, that had it come to pass that I had ended up pregnant before marriage, my mother was the last place I would have gone. My mother was the last person I called when we became engaged, my husband and I,
Mm.
because my mom was so clear about her opinions. She didn't
Mhm.
care what damage they did. My
Mm.
mother was clear that she didn't like my husband. Well,
Mhm.
we're still together 22 years later. But the reason she was the last person I called was because I knew she'd have a negative response because she never bothered to say, I don't agree with this decision, but I love you enough to support you anyway, as an
Right,
example.
right. Yeah.
And true to form, when we called her to tell her we were engaged, her response was, well, all right, if this is what you think you want. I was 30 years old, and
Mm.
that was still the way that she engaged. So here's the thing, we can have opinions. Everyone has them. I'm not saying we ought not, but be aware about how you choose to share them. On the other hand, my husband was married once before, and it didn't come out until after their marriage ended that nobody in his family liked her.
Mhm.
So it's like, why did anyone tell me this? So I'm not saying that you shouldn't share your thoughts or that you shouldn't have opinions. You shouldn't share your concerns. But by saying things like, when you make a mistake, not an if, but when, I'm still going to be here because it's my job as your mother, your father, your coach, your mentor, your aunt, your uncle, your grandparent. I'm still going to advocate for you, even when you make a decision that's different than what I would prefer for you. That's an example
Right.
of how to be a safe place.
Yeah, I love that, and it's so important because you hear often from teens that they don't go to their parents because of how they'll respond, because they're afraid
Mm.
they'll of their judgments, they're afraid of their negativity and not supporting them. And I know how important it is to feel supported in your relationships as you endeavor, and to feel safe to be able to go out and make your own mistakes, which is ultimately how we all learn, right? Yeah.
I think it's important. I've got a friend who has littles right now, under 5. And I hear her saying, like, I watch her with the kids, and I'm like immediately in a, but they're gonna fall. And she always says, let them do dangerous things safely.
Hmm.
And I was blown away by that because that was certainly not what I recall as my experience as a child with my mom. My mom was the, "But you're gonna fall, be careful." And again, there's a balance to be struck, right? Like, we don't want the kid falling and breaking an arm, I get that. But if we can take that concept of let them do dangerous things safely, if we can take that concept into teenage life, that's going to help. Take social media as an example. It is a very hot topic. Cell phones, right? Should my kids have it? Should my kids not have it? I believe that in an age appropriate fashion, when your kids are mature enough to have social media, I think it makes sense to teach them to use it safely. Social media can be dangerous without question. But how can we teach
Hmm.
them to do those dangerous things safely? Having protections on the phone, not letting the phone stay in the room overnight, those types of things. It's like we don't give them keys to a car and expect them to know how to drive. We put them in driver's ed. We put them in safety first driving school. But then we hand them a
Right.
phone and expect them to be able to navigate social media effectively. We expect them to be able to navigate conversations about sex, conversations about college, all those things, but we don't teach them how to do those things safely. So here's an example. I know a lot of families have an agreement that if the kiddo is in a location where things are unsafe, whether there's drinking or there are drugs or there's other activities that the kid doesn't feel safe for whatever reason, if parent and kiddo have an agreement that a single X text message, for example, or a funny word or something like that, that's just, could be
Hmm.
construed as an accidental text by their peers, but that's a communication to mom and dad. Hey, I'm in an unsafe environment. I need you to come get me. Mom or
Hmm.
dad calls or texts and says, hey, there's been an emergency at home. We need to come get you. Be ready in
Yeah.
5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, right? But the key to this is here is this. If they're reaching out for help, if we have set up a circumstance in which we are saying we will come get you, we can't
Hmm.
turn around and discipline them for it harshly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that discipline is completely inappropriate, depending, again, I'm not a parent, I'm not a parenting coach. I'm not going to tell you what the follow up should be. But I'm going to say by doing that, it creates safety for them where they know that there's
Yeah.
action that mom and dad can take or that they can take, and they know how mom and dad are going to act accordingly that gives them safety. Because here's the thing and again, I'm not a parent, but I would like to think that if I was, I would rather that my kid be alive for me to have a conversation with them about the circumstance later, even if it goes undisciplined, than have my kid not reach out to me because they were
Right.
afraid of the trouble
Right.
they were gonna get into.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
I
there's
just
a
love
whole
that.
lot there.
Yeah. And I just love that perspective. Especially social media is such a great example of how it's so important to, like you said, to teach them while they're in your home to have the skills to take those risks and learn those lessons and learn how to be safe and do it. Yeah, that's just such a great perspective. Thank you. Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about the second one then. The what was that
Observe.
again? Observe. Yes.
Um, so observing, this goes back to you always and you never. How
Mm,
often do we get anywhere when we make accusations in the heat of the moment when we're pissed? How far do we
mhm,
get?
mhm. Right.
Not very.
Mhm,
But if we can go, hey, and again, this works with partners as well. Let's take the example of husbands and socks on the floor, shall we? That is an age-old husband-wife challenge, right? Hey,
yeah.
hun, I have observed that 3 out of the last 4 times that you've played basketball with your underwear in the laundry basket, you've missed. What can we adjust to help increase your shooting or improve your shooting? Maybe you stand a little closer to the basket. Maybe you drop kick it, whatever, right? Like I'm being facetious, but by looking at it and
Uh-huh.
going, hey, I've noticed that for the last several days, you've been eating a lot more. Are you eating lunch at school?
Mhm,
Or, hey, I've observed that you haven't been talking to Bobby anymore. Is everything okay? Is Bobby all right? Are you guys like, did your friendship end? Or did something like, did Bobby say or do something that you didn't like? It's simply observation. And the key is that it's not judgment. And it's sometimes really hard to do that. But if you're looking at it from this is what I've seen, rather than wow, you're being a real witch lately, your attitude sucks. Like, again, that's not going to get us very far. Can we
right,
step back and be
right.
like, I've noticed that this behavior has changed. And an underpinning to that is recognizing that behavior is a symptom. Your kids aren't necessarily intentionally being jerks all the time. Sometimes they may be. Your partner might occasionally be like deliberately be being a jerk. Maybe. Maybe you are. Maybe you're in a pissy mood and you just want to stay there. Guilty. We've all had that.
Mhm,
But if we can step away and
mhm.
go, I'm observing that I'm in a bad mood and I'm not beating myself up for it, then it's easier to change it. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's easier. But if we
Yeah,
observe, then we can take the emotion out of it more. Not always, but
right.
more.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's one of my favorite conversation starters with my kids is I notice,
Mhm.
because I think, like you said, it takes the judgment out of it and is just simply, stating an observation. So,
Mhm.
so
Well,
important.
and that
Yeah.
takes us right into the non-judgment, right?
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
descriptive word, taller, shorter, happier, sadder, those are judgments. Some of them are factual, some of them are measurable, some of them are not.
Right.
I
Right.
am shorter than my husband. That's not going to change.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm happier than my husband, I don't know, based on whose evaluation. Or if that was a better decision or a worse decision, those descriptive words, those adjectives, those are all judgments. And I'm not saying that all judgment is bad. I'm saying be aware of putting your own perspectives on somebody else with those
Yes.
words.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, she's better than me. Well, based on who? Or based on whose
Right.
opinions?
Right. Right. All right. Well, I'm loving this conversation. We do need to take a quick sponsor break. So, thank you for tuning in to Kick Your Teen's Troubles to the Curb. And with me today is Clarissa Constantine, and we will be right back after this short break.
Mike Zoric, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zoric, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorick has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Kick Your Teens Troubles to the Curb. We've been having a great conversation all about the foundations of connection. So, Clarissa, start again or tell us again about the N in connection.
So there's actually a total of 3 of them. The first one was non-judgment, and that just basically is going, hey, let me not impose my opinions and what's right for me on somebody else. There's a
Mm,
lot of places that I see this show up in parent-teen relationships. As I mentioned early on, part of my experience with my mom was that I believed she wanted what was best for me, but her definition of what was best and my definition of what was best didn't often align. And so recognizing, hey, yes, as parents, you're the ones who do know your kids best, second to them as they get to know themselves. And I think a lot of times as
right,
adults, we fall into a pattern of, but I'm the adult, I know better. And yes, in many cases we do because we do have lived experiences without question. But as that child turns into a tween and into a teen, they're getting a sense of themselves as well. And I think sometimes it's really easy for us to discount that. We see the outside things they like, oh, I like hockey, I like marching band, I like drawing, I like theater, whatever the case may be, but we don't necessarily honor in the same way some of their internal values and the things that are important to them other than the activities that they do. So being aware of some of our judgments on those things. I also see that come up a lot in conversations around religion, politics, and sex, which we see that in
mhm,
in outside the nuclear family as well.
right,
It may be that you're teaching kids based on your religious or moral values not to have sex before marriage. And they may not abide by that. They may have different perspectives. Again, not saying that we need to, um, just condone certain behaviors or condone them liking the other political party better than I do or whatever, but to recognize that they're going to have different perspectives, and that doesn't necessarily make them wrong. And that by judging them and getting into arguments and telling them that they are wrong when perhaps two things aren't mutually exclusive, that can that can lead to disconnection.
yeah, yeah. And I think a important part of that is like you said, those expectations that we have for our teens as well. And so sometimes when things don't go as we expect or they don't make the choices that we expect, then we can become judgmental, right? Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So
And so I think the next one, the nod and smile, which is actually more about keeping quiet, is one of the best ways that we can combat that judgment that is a natural human tendency. So I don't know if you've ever read the book, Christina, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It was written in the early 1900s. Most entrepreneurs have read it, but there's a point in there that says we have two eyes, two ears, and one mouth. Use them proportionally. Unless you're
Hmm.
the guest on a podcast or the speaker on stage or something like that, right? But when we're talking like
Yeah.
interpersonal communications, how often do we jump in because we like to hear ourselves talk or we think we're right and we just have to jump in with our opinions on things? So,
Hmm.
one of the things that I encourage families to do is to think back to elementary school where we learned about the 5 W's and H: who, what, where, when, why, and how. If you've got some
Hmm.
stock questions ready to go for circumstances where you're wanting to, excuse me, get your kiddo talking more and sharing their perspectives, remember those who, what, where, when, why, and how. And like I was saying, if you've got those like stock questions, well, who were you at the party with? Who did you meet? Think of like 5 different questions for each of those and
Ah.
have them like on a note in your phone. And look at your phone to think to get the questions if you need. I'm not saying get buried in your phone. I'm not saying go to social media and ignore your kid. I like there's a line there. But if you've got questions ready to go, or at the very least you think about those 5 W's and H, that gives you a starting point of questions to ask to get your kids talking more. Yes, no questions. Those are questions that can be answered with a simple yes or a simple no. Like, did you have fun? Nope. That conversation's done. Unless you have a follow-up from the 5 W's and H, like, "Well, how come you didn't have fun? What wasn't fun about it?" Or if you,
Right.
"Yes, I had fun." Great. What was the best part? It's still having
Right.
those 5 W's and H to follow up with to get them talking. The more the other person talks, the more they like you. It is true in sales, it is true in relationships with your partner, it is true in relationships with your kids, because
Right.
they will feel heard.
Yes, and it is important because that, and I love that you are talking about this because it is one of the most common questions I get is how do I get my teen to open up to me, right? And so what you're saying is by asking those curiosity questions, being trained
Mhm,
in positive discipline, the first thing that we learned was, how to ask those curiosity questions. And I love that you're using the 5 W's and the H, because I think that's a little easier to remember to kind of get those questions out there.
mhm,
And what's also important then is that we are truly being curious, that we
mhm,
are truly interested in their answers, right? Not just taking, listening for a moment just to have a comeback or a response,
mhm,
a response, but like you said, truly listening
absolutely.
and truly being interested and getting to know them and
Mhm,
their perspective. And then again, not being judgmental of their response, but really trying
mhm,
to hear out, their perspective and have an open mind about that and learning from, learning more about them as they share with you, right? So
mhm.
important.
And
Yeah,
you went exactly where I was gonna go, which is you cannot respond judgmentally, or you will no longer be a safe place for your kids. Right?
exactly.
Now, again,
Exactly.
how do we respond if we don't agree with the decision? It's okay to not agree. Be like, "Wow, that's a different perspective than I would have expected from you," or, "That's a different perspective than my own." And then certainly, I mean, yes, as the adults who are guiding your children to becoming successful humans, you do need to decide where you go with that as a teaching moment. But in the initial situation, being like, hey, I'm just listening, I'm getting your responses. But now let's also talk about nod and smile when your kid comes home with a D on their report card. Now it's different these days than it was back in the olden days, if you will, with, technology and whatnot being what it is. Parents can sign in and see students' grades along the way. Gone are the days that we can take a paper report card and use whiteout and change the grade on our report card and lie to our parents, right? But still, what if
Right.
you haven't checked in a while and all of a sudden you log in and you're like, dude, your kid's missed like the last 6 assignments. You could blow
Mhm.
your stack and be like, Bobby, what are you doing? Why haven't you done the homework? Yeah, you could. Or you could get curious, which again is the C down the
Mhm.
road, and ask questions. Hey, Bobby, I just saw, this is observe, I just saw that there aren't grades for your last 6 assignments. So you want to be careful about what you're observing. The grades aren't there. Does that mean Bobby didn't turn them in?
Mhm.
Not necessarily. It could be that the teacher was in a
Right.
car accident over the weekend and is behind on grading. So if you come at
Right.
Bobby and you're like, "Da, da, 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 you haven't turned in," he's like, Mom, I turned them in. No, you didn't. It says. So this is when you're looking at observing, being careful about what you're observing. Are you bringing meaning to it?
Right.
Because if you see 6 missing assignments, what you see is 6 missing assignments, not that he didn't turn it in. So be aware of that.
Right.
And then ask a question. I've observed that there are missing question or missing assignments. What's going on?
Mhm.
That opens it up for him to be like, oh, the teacher was in a car accident and told us yesterday that she's behind on grading assignments. Okay, reasonable. Now, if you suspect that your
Mhm.
kiddo's lying, that's a completely different conversation. But this could be a more effective way to have a conversation on the front end anyway. Because then the
Yeah.
next or the E is explore. Oh, goodness. I'm going to reach out to the teacher and see if she's okay. Hi, Mrs. Smith. Bobby told me you were in a car accident. I just want to check in. Is everything okay? Like, are you
Yeah.
okay? Oh, I wasn't in a car
Mhm.
accident. Oh, now Bobby and I have a different conversation to have. Hey, Bobby, I reached out to Mrs. Smith to see if she was okay. She said she wasn't actually in a conversation. Can you help me understand?
Right.
Right?
I love that.
It's
Can
going to
you
be
help
a
me
different
understand?
outcome. Right.
Mhm.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So looking at it and going, I think part of this too is giving them the benefit of the doubt. Kids,
Mhm.
especially ADHDers, are really good at lying. And I'm not saying that to judge. I'm saying that because it's a commonality with folks with ADHD. We have to save our bacon. Okay, we can't be found out. And so they're going to try to cover their butt. And if you give them a chance to own it without being embarrassed, you're going to have a happier, healthier
Right.
relationship with your kids. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
explore, that's an example of it. It's something small like that. Oh, I'm just going to go ask Mrs. Smith how she's doing. What if it's something big, right? They come to you with something, a very tumultuous conversation that we're having in our society today is about gender identity. I remember the
Mhm.
first time that I was confronted with this topic. I knew nothing about it, nothing at all. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what transgender was. I had no concept of how to respond. I was mentoring in a women's organization, and one of the members said to me, "Hey, Clarissa, what happens to my membership if I transition?" And Christina, thank God I was on the other side of the room and facing the other direction because I was like, huh? And looking back
Mhm.
at it, I know that look came across my face, and if it were the case that I were facing this individual, it might have
Right.
come across that I wasn't a safe place simply because I didn't know what it was. And
Right.
I mean, this is 15 years ago, right? But I remember thinking, like having that feeling of like, what does she mean? And I was able to like recompose myself and be like, I don't know. I don't know what you mean. Can you help me understand? That's one of my like go-tos. And
Mhm.
she started an explanation to me of what transgender was. And I was like,
Mhm.
I'm going to go back to your initial question of what happens to your membership status in this organization that is a women's only organization. I don't know, but we can find out. And you bet your bottom
Yeah.
dollar, I went and did some exploration. And so I get that in a parent child context, again, there's that emotional history. I get that
Right.
it's probably going to spark differently than it did for me. But that's an example of looking at it and going, I don't know. It's okay to not know. I observe in society that parents and kids have this sense that parents are supposed to know everything. Parents think it of
Mhm.
themselves, and kids think it of their parents.
Right.
But the reality is, like, Christina, you're a mom, right? Like you've been through
Mhm.
teenagers. And great, you've been through a
Mhm.
couple teenagers, but you were a parent to one teenager, and then you were a parent
Mhm.
to another teenager. And I'm gonna go on the record and guess that parenting the second teenager was different than parenting the first teenager. Like you've never been a teenager
Right?
before, parent of a teenager until you've been a parent of a teenager, but then you've been a parent to that teenager, not all
Mhm.
teenagers. So recognizing
Yeah.
you don't know everything, you don't need to know everything, you need to be okay not knowing everything and going, "Oh, I'm gonna go explore and I'm gonna learn."
Yeah.
And it's okay to say to your kids, like the then woman, now transitioned to man, who was my entree into this conversation, was incredibly patient with me, saying, "This has been something in my mind and on my heart for very long and or for a long time, and I recognize that it's new for you." And they were very gracious as I learned to adjust. And so I was able
Mhm.
to say, yeah, this is new for me. I'm not going to get it right. I don't get pronouns right all the time. It's a different concept. Thank you for working with me to learn and giving myself
Right.
grace. But then that also goes into challenging your own truths. If you are a believer
Mhm.
of there's two genders, end of story, a transgender conversation is going to be really challenging. And I'm not going to tell you which way to believe. I'm going to say find your own exploration and education, but challenge your
Mhm.
truths about, everyone in your community, all their kids go to college, and they go to good colleges, and they go to expensive colleges, and they go to brand name schools. And your kid wants to be a mechanic and own an auto repair shop. That's going to force
Right.
you to challenge your truths. Maybe your
Mhm.
truth is going to college is the way to be successful. Or maybe on the other hand, maybe you're a family of immigrants and you came to this country recognizing that the opportunities are more significant here than they were in the country of origin. And you came here and you made these sacrifices and you've had this vision of your child going to college. And in your mind, that is the definition of success. But
Yeah.
that's not what your child defines success as. When you recognize that you're being triggered by something, it's likely that that whatever is coming up is violating what you believe to be true. I've seen this in
Mhm.
religion. Again, I've seen it in conversations about higher education. I've seen it in conversations about social media, like all these topics that are contentious and need conversation and need communication. But part of that is we have to look at it and go, why is this triggering me? Why is this bothering me? Because at the end of the day, we're the only ones we can control. And that's really hard. Again, go back to the husband with the underwear or the socks in the laundry basket. Can't you just pick them up when they miss? Like, how hard is it? Right?
Right.
Well, if you're not going to pick it up and rethrow it, then I can't imagine in a heteronormative couple, I can't imagine a wife who doesn't understand this or some variation thereof, or a husband who doesn't understand it, right?
Right.
Challenge your truths. The
Mhm.
T is take your time. If you feel like things are in a tenuous place, they didn't get there more than likely overnight, and they're going to take time to change. But the fact is, if we can change the way that we approach things, other people around us more than likely will change. And if they choose not to, well, then we have different decisions to make. If your
Right.
husband refuses to pick up that dirty underwear, or your kid, or whatever, right? If they
Mhm.
refuse to do it, what can we change? Here's an example for ADHD. Um, had an ADHD specialist on my podcast last year, I think it was, and she was talking about how to help your kids keep their room clean. She said, take the doors off the closets because
Mm.
if they don't see the hangers, they're not going to think to hang the clothing. Don't get drawers like a dresser that has solid drawers on it. Go to IKEA and get a plastic dresser drawer of some variety because then they can see it. If they see the drawer where the socks go, the socks have a better likelihood of navigating into the sock drawer.
Mm.
Otherwise, you're going to have disarray on the floor. So,
Yeah.
how can we explore and take our time to make different decisions? And that's where the innovate comes in. How can we
Mm.
do things differently? If we keep, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting different results. If
Right.
you keep having the same argument, you're not going to get anywhere. So, how can we innovate
Mhm.
different ideas? Friend of mine has a kiddo who I think when he was 12, they were having knockdown dragouts about chores. ADHD kid, great kid, doesn't mean to be a jerk, just kind of comes by it naturally in terms of he knows he has to take the trash out and he just doesn't, overflowing trash doesn't signal to him, I should take this out. Might not signal to your partner
Mm.
either. Just saying. Okay, so maybe they need to be taught that overflowing trash means to take it out. Or maybe we figure out a way to put like a marker on the side of the bin to go, when the trash gets to this level before it's falling out, this is when I take it out. It may seem like
Right.
ridiculous to us. Like, how do you not know? Like the trash is overflowing. How is that not a signal to take it out? Again, innovate. She went to her kiddo and she goes, all right, I'm tired of having this conversation. You're grounded from YouTube, except for exploration about how you can solve the chore problem we keep having. You come up with
Mm.
ideas because I'm fresh out of them.
Yeah. 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 I love that.
Make sense? Um,
Use
own your own story.
technology. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Own your own story again comes it back to kind of like challenging your truths. What's true for me? Or maybe this pattern of behavior is actually a trigger for me. There have
Mm.
definitely been times in my marriage that I recognize sometimes the way my husband and I engage is very similar to the way that my mother and I would engage. But I at least have the
Mm.
recognition now that, oh, that's a pattern that I have fallen into. And not surprising that I married a man with similar I don't want to say challenges, similar behaviors that are continuing to challenge me to grow. But recognizing,
Right.
oh,
Right.
that's a trigger. How do I not let that trigger me? One of my earliest life
Mm.
coaches told me that our life's experience is like a washcloth soaked in gasoline. And
Mhm.
then somebody else's behavior can be like the match that lights the wash rag that has gasoline on it. And it's not that their
Mm.
behavior is problematic, it's that their behavior triggered something in my emotional experience.
Right.
And I need to own that side of it in order to help not have the same engagements over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So important. This has been such an amazing conversation, and we didn't even get all the way through the acronym. So
All good.
tell our audience how they can learn more about your work and learn more about the foundations of your connections
Mhm.
blueprint.
Sure. So
Mm.
everything lives at parenttweenconnection.com. Technically, there is only one T in there. So it's PARENTWEEN connection.com. We are geared toward community for families of kids primarily between the ages of 10 and 20, as well as community for the professionals who support them. So we have two memberships, as you mentioned earlier, family Parent Tween Village, which is for families, and the Trusted Expert Network, which is for professionals. And the goal is that we're all in community together to help families find the right resources and the moral support and the knowledge and the education to help themselves and help their kiddos. And so it's all right there at Parent Tween Connection.
Wonderful. And I can say it is a very supportive, amazing community. So definitely check that out. And you have a podcast as well. So you had to check that
Yep.
out.
And Christina was a guest
Yeah.
on that. So she was a guest back here
Yeah.
recently, and you can actually find us. That'll take you over to YouTube as well. We do a live that goes to YouTube, and then eventually the recordings get uploaded to the podcast. Yes.
Yeah. 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 Wonderful. And for checking my website out at empoweredparenting.family, where you can download your free 10 ways to distinguish between typical teenage phase and teen depression. And if you haven't grabbed a copy of my book yet, how to, or oh my gosh, everyday grace, the power of everyday grace, parenting teens with depression. And then I also have the companion workbook that just got came out as well. So you can find both of those on Amazon. So check that out. Thank you so much for tuning in to Kick Your Teens Troubles to the Curb. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.
This has been Kicking Your Teens Troubles to the Curb with host Christina Nation. Tune in each week as Christina features expert interviews, real-life stories, and practical strategies that empower parents to connect with their teens and effectively address their struggles. Here, Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Eastern, on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.